So we're back with lesson 7, part 2. I'm going to comment out, keep my original code that was here. So our error is occurring down here in this passport.use, in the serialize user and deserialize user methods. So I'm going to comment those out for now. We will come back to them. So there's some other ways we can try this. So I've commented out the local strategy for now and the passport.use. My app seems to run, but we will have to deal with the serialize and deserialize a little bit later. We'll come back to it. Since it may not be completed today, that's okay. We have a few other things we still need to do in our setup. So my app should be running. So I want to create links in the nav bar over on the right for register and login, and then load those appropriate views when the time comes. So let's go and do that. I've actually put 2 files up on Blackboard that we can download. I'm going to go to my project. Inside of views, I'm going to make a new subfolder here. I'm going to make a new folder inside of views called Auth. And we're going to create register and login views. So inside of views and Auth, I'm now going to create a new file. The first one will be called register, and it'll have an HBS extension. And then I'm also going to create login. Now, all of the HTML for these views I've put on Blackboard, so we can simply copy and paste this. So I'll open up my register file first. And in the lesson 7 folder, here's all the HTML. So I'm just going to copy all of that and paste it in. So this is just straight HTML here. I've added a regular expression for the password field so that they've got to be 8 characters and they must contain an uppercase, a lowercase letter, as well as 1 digit. I'll save that. And then we can copy and paste the login HTML as well. We'll copy that. So we can go to our layout file next, and we can add links that should appear on the right end of the nav bar that are going to show links to our register and login. So we've got our first, here we've got our UL with the class of navbar nav, and we've got our about and employers. I'm going to create a second UL, and I'm going to use navbar nav again, so it's styled the same way, but if I use MS Auto, that will right align this. And here I'm going to put in a link to I'm going to use the same classes, and here our link is going to be /auth /register. Help if I spell it right. And then I'll copy that. And our second link, our href will be auth/login, and our link will say login. So there are now 5 links in the nav bar. We had 3 before. We had our kind of site title with the class of navbar brand that goes to the root that says job tracker. We have our about and employers links, and now we'll have a separate navigation bar separate navigation list over on the right side. So if we want to see how this looks, right? So now I've got links over here. And when we click, we get 404 not found. To be expected, right? We have the views, but we don't have any root handlers for auth register and auth login. So we're going to need to create an auth controller with a get method for this path and a get method for login. And then we'll need to connect that new controller into our app.js. Now, eventually, we'll add some logic here that these links will get toggled. When our user is anonymous, the user will see these links. And once somebody logs in, we'll hide register and login, and we will show their username, and we'll also show a logout link instead. As soon as they log out, the username and logout disappear, register and login reappear. So we're now going to go and make a new controller. So inside of controllers, I'm going to make a new file called auth.js. So we can set up, first we'll set up get methods to load our register and login, and then eventually we need post method, what to do, how do we invoke our user model and passport when someone signs up, and then when they log in. So we'll require express, we'll create a router, so when we have a get request, it's /auth/register, we will want to render the registration page. We'll make our controller public by exporting it. So we could try our register link now and see if it will load our register view that we just built and populated from the code on Blackboard. So now when I try to register, how come, why did we get a 404 here? We have our auth controller. It renders the view called auth register, which we have. I mean, we would expect this with login, right? Because we haven't written a method in the controller to handle login, but we've got a method here for register. So why would this happen? We haven't actually done anything wrong. So why is our register page not showing up for us? One more thing we need to do. What is that? I know it's early. It's not that early. Thank you. You got it, Colton. We've created the auth controller, but we've never registered it in auth.js and attached it to any paths that start with auth. So we need to reference it, and then we need to point it to all requests that start with AUTH. So up near the top of app.js, we added our employer's controller. So let's add a link to our auth controller. And then we're going to have to scroll down to where we do the URL mapping so that we tell our application any URLs that start with /auth are to be directed to the auth controller. And we'll wind up with 5 methods in this controller. We'll have get and post for register, we'll have get and post for login, and we'll have get for log out. So add your link to our new controller. And then we scroll down here to our URL mapping. We want all requests that start with /auth to be directed to our new controller. This should fix the 404 now when we click on register. So now it shows up. I think I'll change the style of my button from blue to yellow. I think also my login link that I put on Blackboard, this is going to be wrong because notice the path, it's missing the word auth. So I'm going to make 2 little changes to register. So instead of button info, I'm going to change that to button warning. And my link here for login, that has to start with the path auth. So I just made that one little change, 2 little changes on line 16 and on line 18. So now my button's yellow and my link calls /auth/login. Now this link still doesn't work because in our auth controller, we don't have a get method. We haven't provided any instruction as to what to do here. So we'll go back to auth.js. So now we want to add a root handler for a GET request at auth login. So almost the exact same code. We're just handling a different path. We're loading a different view and providing a different title. So now both our register and login links should be functional. Change. Now I'll need to make the same couple changes, those two little changes I made to register. I changed the class on the button, and I added, if you see in my status bar, I added auth to the path. Need to do the same thing. I want to add auth to the path of my little register link, and I'm going to change the class on my button. So in login, I'm going to change my info class to the warning class. And the href on my register link, I'm going to add in the auth prefix. So that'll give me a yellow button, and it will fix the broken link I had in the register link. So now button's yellow. Now I can navigate between my two forms. So now we can try. We're still gonna have to resolve, which I may have to do on my own time. Still gonna have to resolve the serialize and deserialize user pieces. But I think we can try to register a user. So I think we can try a post method in our auth controller. So we need to require passport here. So that's needed for auth. So we'll need passport. We also need our user model. Right, so our auth controller needs to use our user model. And now we can try and set up a post method for what happens when the user submits the register form. So when we get a post request at /register, let's try it out. So our user model that we created, right, it inherits from, it extends passport local mongoose. So we'll just go and have a quick look at passport local mongoose for a minute. So we've kind of done all this. Okay, I think I might see what we need to fix. We'll come back to this. So I'm looking for the list of methods that come with passport local mongoose. Said some of the documentation is not great. Let's go look at their Git repository and see. So here are the methods. So there's this method built in called register. So we want to call the register method. So it will register a new user instance with a given password. It also automatically checks if a username is unique. So the register method is going to prevent two users from signing up with the same username. So that's good. So in here, we will call user.register. We're going to create a new user where the username comes from our form. Then we're passing in our password separately. Why would you suppose we would pass the password as a separate parameter? What's different about how the username and the password would be processed when we're creating a new account? They don't get treated the same way. How come? We're going to do something with the password that we don't need to do with our username. So notice here, the username is set in JSON, but the password is set as a separate parameter. What do we want to do? What do we want Passport to do with our password values before we store them in the database? Do we store usernames and passwords the same way? Okay, well, we'll come back to this question. And then we've got our callback. So we're going to try to create a new user. We will either get back an error or a user account, one or the other. If we get an error, we will again load the register page. So for example, let's say the username already exists. Keep the user on the registration page. Otherwise, we will for now, we'll log them in so we'll take them to we'll log them in automatically. Registration. Okay, log the user and redirect. So we will take them to the employers list if the registration is successful. If for some reason it fails, we'll keep them on the registration page. So let's try this out. I'm not 100% sure it's going to work because we do have that little issue where we've commented out a few lines in our app.js, but we'll try it and then we can go and look in our MongoDB and see if we had any user created. So I'll leave this up for a minute, but I'm just going to open a tab. And we can go to MongoDB, because after we try this, we can see what's in our database. So if this is successful, when we go and look at our database right now there's nowhere in the database to store any users. This isn't working very well. Come on, MongoDB, you can do it. There you go. So if I open up my database and go to our collections, no, I actually do have, so it's built because we've got a user model. It's actually built the collection for me now called users, but there's nothing in it. So I'll try to sign up. So what I'm going to suggest is, for simplicity, let's all use the same username and password. That way no one has to remember it. So I'll use test@test.com. I'll make my password test1234 with a capital T. So I'm going to try to register this account. Okay. So it kept me here, which suggests something didn't work. If I refresh my data, okay, still no data in the users. I'll see if there was an error in my terminal. We posted. Okay. So I got an error. So maybe in here I will console.log. Let's see why. I'll try it again. Maybe we'll see in the terminal why this didn't work. Oops. Okay. Okay, it says password is required. So let's go and check. So the username was okay, but it's saying password is required. Let's look. My input name is password. So that looks okay. Request.body.password. It says the value is undefined. Oh. Got it. Okay, I'm going to make a change to issues in our model. I'm going to take this out, this required attribute. Don't worry, it still will be required, but I don't want that in the model because we passed the password in as a separate parameter. I think that should fix it. Try again. Okay, so now I get directed to the employers, which suggests that our registration was successful. If I go back to MongoDB and refresh, now we see I've got a username, and there's also a salt and a hash value. So the salt is a unique string that's used to hash the password. Okay, so our password is this long encrypted string. The salt value ensures the password is unique. So if two users enter the same password, the salting ensures that how it's stored in the database is unique every time. So our registration was successful. We'll see if I try to register again with the same email address, I should get an error because the register method we're using in Passport Local Mongoose, it has a duplication check built in. So I'm going to try it. I shouldn't be able to sign up again with the same email. So now if I register, it should bring me back here. Yeah, and it keeps me here. And we can see the error, the Passport Local Mongoose, which is a user with the given username is already registered. So when we call this register method, it automatically does duplicate checking. If I go back and refresh again, there's still only one user. So we can try the login. I'm not confident login is going to work at this point until I can fix the error in app.js, but we'll try it anyway. The code for authenticating on the login page is not very complicated. So we're going to write a post handler for auth login. And to validate user with Passport Local. So when we have a post request, this is going to be a little different. I said Passport was a middleware, so it can interrupt our regular HTTP request response flow. So we're actually not going to use our usual express callback with request and response. In this case, we want to call our Passport middleware. It has an authenticate method. And this is where we pass it a strategy. How are we trying to authenticate? Using the local strategy. So check our user model and our database. And this authenticate method has several options we can set. First one is a success redirect. So where do we take a user who logs in successfully? Let's take them to the employer list. We've got a failure redirect. That should be obvious. call auth.login. So let's try this. Not sure if this is going to work with our serialize and deserialize commented out. I have a feeling it won't, but we will try it. So when we post, we're going to call the Passport middleware, authenticate in our local database, and then redirect one of these two places. Valid logins go to employers, invalid logins are redirected back to the login view. So we'll give this a shot. So first I'll put in a login that I know doesn't work. It should keep me on the logins. Now eventually we'll have to deal with displaying some sort of message here. Right? I don't know. Is the site not working or is my login invalid? I don't know. Now I'll try my good login. Okay. So the login is valid. But yeah, the code we've got, it's trying to store the user into the session. It's trying to write that user object. Yet every time I'll come back to that. Let's also maybe deal with the error message. Right, so when you put in an invalid one, we want to print an error message here. And Passport also includes an option called a failure message. So if it fails, we're going to basically put into the session a message called invalid login. Then we can add some logic on our login screen to show one of two different messages at the top. If there is no error message, we want to show something that just says, please enter your credentials. And if there is an error message, we want to show an invalid login. So we'll put a little alert. We can put an alert up here somehow. So before we load the view, so we can check our request.session. There's a messages variable. So our messages are either going to be equal to the session variable, or else this is an array, or else it'll just be empty. So we're basically going to move them to a local variable, read them from the session, put them in a local variable, and clear out any session messages. And now when we're loading the view, we're going to pass it a title, and we're also going to pass this messages variable or array. So now when our login view is rendered, we can check the messages property. If there are any messages, any errors, we can show them. If not, we'll just put out sort of a generic instruction. So this adds message request.session messages. So on our login view, we can add a little HTML with an if statement at the top, so we know what kind of message we want to display and how to style it. If it's an instruction versus an error message, we can use two different classes for styling. So we can go back to login, and above the form, we use a little handlebars if. So if we have messages, else, so if there's any errors, we can print them in red. So we'll have one of two different alerts that print at the top. When there are no errors, it'll be in gray, and it'll say, please enter your credentials. But if the user has just tried logging in and failed, we're going to print a red message instead that says invalid login. Okay, so now when I log in, we get this. And if I put in a bad login, it turns red and we get the other message. So at least we know there's some clue to the user here. Okay, we did try to find you in the database and we didn't. Now our login error still persists. We're not serializing the user. I'm going to try and put that line of code back. I know we need it there. Let's just see. I think this is going to was crashing the site. So we're going to get the same error. That it wants a strategy when we call. Now we've done. I'm just following their documentation, which, as I said, isn't very good. We're creating the strategy, and here it says we don't have one. So this was the old way. I'll put this back one more time, and then we may have to leave this until our next lesson. I'll try this one more time, but I don't think it's going to work. We'll see. No. Authentication strategies must have a name. Okay. So I guess our reading week is going to start a little bit early. They've changed this. They haven't updated the documentation. I'm probably missing something small, but I won't waste your time. Okay. I think we'll call it a day for today. There's no homework over reading week. Okay, so when we come back after reading week, we'll fix up our session management here. I'm sure it's something small. Documentation hasn't been updated, but obviously the library has been updated. So I will sort it out. We will fix this up. Then we can add security checks on our create, update, and delete methods. And then we will also enable GitHub authentication. We should be able to do that in our next 2-hour class. Okay, I will put my code up on GitHub as we've done it so far. It's not complete, but we'll finish it off in the next class.